What a great turnout. I see it's still ticking up, the number of attendees. So thank you everyone for joining this session. So I'll just start by introducing myself. My name is Sebastian Krakowski. I'm an assistant professor here at the Stockholm School of Economics House of Innovation. So I do research mainly on artificial intelligence, digital transformation. What does the technology mean for us, for our organizations, how we innovate, how we can be more effective and innovative in our work, and also on society, but also I do a lot of individual level work. So how do algorithms impact us when they are somebody, our coworkers? And that's the topic today, of course. How can we use generative AI? And I'll try and make the argument that it's not just for efficiency or accuracy, but if you experiment with the technology, you can also use it to be more creative and innovative. So by the end of today's session, I hope that I have, regardless if you have barely used generative AI or if you're prompting all day. In any case, I hope to inspire some new use cases for you to explore with prompting. As mentioned in the chat, you can leave comments if you like. I'll try and also address questions. We don't have that much time, but I'll do my best to keep an eye on the Q&A as well. So let me know what you think and what you are thinking about. Okay, so just let me share my screen and we'll kick things off. So AI as a technology is progressing super quickly, even exponentially. So it's catching up, as you can see here, with human performance. It's already overtaken us in handwriting recognition, speech recognition, image recognition. And it's quickly catching up in mathematics and common sense completion. So it could be, for example, the capital of France is blank, and then it answers Paris. And now it's also starting to catch up in creative tasks. And that's really a new logic. So we're used to AI being rational, cold, calculating. But now with generative AI, which is the focus today, it's also impacting creative work, analytical work, consulting reports being written with generative AI. And just to briefly sort out the terminologies here. So AI is a whole host of technologies. And from the beginning, I guess you could say in the 1940s, artificial intelligence was rule-based. So that's the blue part of this Venn diagram. Rule-based systems. So we tried to explain everything we wanted AI to do for us using rules and formal logic, symbolic logic. After a while, we realized it's kind of hard to explain everything and account for every contingency. So after a couple of decades, we got machine learning and deep learning, which instead enables machines to learn from data, from a lot of data, to infer rules and predict things on their own without us having to explain everything we want. And that's often referred to as predictive AI, now that we have generative AI. And the yellow bubble is the focus today in this webinar. So it's generative, as the name implies. It can create new content, come up with language, images. And as I'll talk about in just a couple of minutes, it's multimodal. So we can train these models with a lot of data, just like with predictive AI. And then it sees patterns. But then what it can do, in addition to predictive AI, is not just optimize or predict something, but it can create new output that we can use that is often surprisingly accurate and useful and thought-provoking. So that's why I'm saying that it's not just for efficiency and optimization, but the technology can also help us be more creative and innovative. So those are some of the applications that I'll address today. And also, just to clarify, prompt engineering. A prompt is basically your instructions to a generative AI model, typically a large language model. like ChatGPT. So the instructions or whatever you tell the model, that's a prompt, and prompt engineering, which we'll be talking about today, and I'll be doing some demos, is about how can we make generative AI understand what we want. So basically, how can we write better instructions? And what I will basically, I'll contradict myself a little bit by saying that it doesn't matter all that much. There are no secret prompts. You need to experiment and iterate. So that's my best advice right away. Take the time to get to know the models, ChatGPT, Claude, Google Gemini, get a feel for how they work. But remember that it's not Google and it's not always optimizing, but it's actually predicting language. So think of it as a young, ambitious, well-intentioned person, a little alien that wants to help you, and it doesn't always know what it doesn't know. So you need to help it along. But I'll get back to some prompt engineering principles that I hope are helpful. But just right away, I want to emphasize the importance of actually experimenting and trying it out and seeing for yourself where it can help you most. Okay, so I mentioned that it's a particular kind of technology, and I think it's worth just briefly talking about what it is and how it's trained, because this is where I see a lot of misunderstanding and people getting disappointed or frustrated with generative AI, because we're used to Googling, we're used to databases, we're used to predictive AI or even symbolic AI, but we're not used to generative AI. I call them aliens because it's a new kind of life form, you could say, that is very special in how it operates and functions. So first of all, training data, just like predictive AI, it's based on data, lots and lots and lots of data. Here are two examples. So the last generation of OpenAI's model, GPT. So this was for GPT-3. You can see that most of the training data is Common Crawl, which is basically the available internet. Then it's Reddit, the forum Reddit, and the comments that get the most upvotes that are presumably most helpful or relevant. And then books, digital format books, and Wikipedia. So that's what it's trained on, and it sees patterns in language. The same for example, for Llama, which is Facebook or Meta's model. Again, you see most of it is Common Crawl, and then C4, that's a cleaned up version of Common Crawl. And then forums like GitHub, information from Wikipedia, the entire Wikipedia, digital format books, Archive, ARXIV, that's preprints, so work in progress, academic manuscripts, and Stack Exchange, a forum for software development and coding. So that's the training data. So it can see a lot of patterns in human expression on the internet. And then this is a run through a machine learning algorithm. It's trained using a neural network. So input comes from the left, yellow, and then it goes through these nodes in the network, kind of a little bit like our human brains, and then it outputs something and predicts something. And what it's predicting here, in the case of LLMs, so large language models, so chatbots, basically, is it's predicting the next word in the sequence. And it's doing this all the time when it's coming up with answers to your questions. So here, in this example, if the model is given a sequence of words, the sky is, and it's been trained, so it's been pre-trained on the internet, it predicts what's the next likely word to come after the sky is. So you see there the vector of the probabilities of different tokens or words. So the most likely one here is blue. So if we're in the predictive AI logic, it would say blue. In this case, it says blue. But now, and this is the important part when it comes to generative AI, it's not always going to say blue. So it samples quasi-randomly from this vector of likely words. So I hope you are still with me. So it could be the next time I feed this model the words the sky is, it's going to say clear. That's the second most likely word. And then the next time it's going to say blue again. And that's why this technology frustrates so many of us or surprises us, because it's not always giving us the same answer. It's not always giving us the correct answer. I mean, it might be that the sky is blue, it might be that it's clear. If I'm in creative writing, maybe I want it to be raining outside. I want there to be a thunderstorm. And so then I would prompt it that way. So it's important to understand this difference compared to previous iterations of AI technology, that it's predicting language in this case, or pixels when it comes to image generation. But it's not always going to give you the same answer. And then there's a lot of other stuff going on behind the scenes, of course. But this, in kind of simple terms, is how these models are trained and how they function. So they predict, and then there's a random element. And that random element, for me, the way I think of it, is creativity and innovation. So innovation, one definition is recombination of concepts and ideas. And that's what these models are doing. So we can use that to our advantage. So I'll explain what I mean by that. Just here is my setup, or how I use. In front of me right now, I have one screen here and one screen here. So on the first screen, I have a manuscript, for example, that I'm working on. On my other screen, I have ChatGPT and Claude, which is a competitor by Anthropic, a competitor of OpenAI's. And I always use these two models to come up with ideas or proofread or help me express myself or what have you. Sometimes I play around with these other models by Google, Microsoft Copilot, Meta's Llama that I was talking about just now. I like music, so I use Suno for music generation. And sometimes I dabble with these other models as well to try and get a sense for what's up and coming, like DeepSeek, for example, from China. Notebook LM, you can generate podcasts from documents. So again, I just want to encourage you to experiment, get a sense of which models work for you, which ones do you think are useful. Also worth keeping in mind that generative AI is multimodal, so you can talk to it. It's quicker than to dictate, and advanced voice mode it can also pick up on emotional cues. So it's not just transcribing, it's actually processing the sound and responding to you. Image recognition, what guitar is he playing? Guitar tabs, what music is this? I give it my Spotify listening data, and I ask it to write code, and then it analyzes my listening patterns. And it gives me the code that I can run locally on Python, in Python. Generates an image that represents my music taste. It can help me with chess. It hasn't been trained to play chess, but it can help me play chess, which is astonishing. It's just predicting tokens, so subunit of words. And it can play chess at an average rating, which is incredible. I get an email and I don't really understand what it's about or what this person wants from me. So I ask it for a second opinion or read between the lines. Here, once again, that ever-present question, what should I make for dinner? So I take a picture of my fridge and ask it, what should I make for dinner? And it sees that I have chicken, I have some sour cream. So it recommends chicken parmesan, because I have some parmesan cheese in there as well, which is great. So problem solved. So again, not just optimization, efficiency, but creativity and innovation. Some use cases. Before we get into the prompting, here I use it to summarize. So I have this table with new research coming out on AI, and it's more than I can read on my own. So I ask it to replicate this structure, this table that you see at the top there. So the URL, the date, the title, publication, the method, and 3 bullet points, concisely summarizing the main findings. And that helps me keep up to date reasonably well. And if I'm actually interested in a paper, I'm going to go read it, of course. So here is how I would do this. I give it the table, and I give it the example here at the top that I filled in to show it what I want. And then I say, give me the same thing. I'll put it as a table. So here you can see it outputs it first on the top right there. It outputs it as a paragraph, but that's not what I wanted. So then I say output as a table with the same format as my example. And then it gives me the table. And then I can also ask it to do it in Excel, so I can download the file. So that's one very basic application, or summarizing. Another example that is a little more creative. So I take my most recently published paper, or this could also be a manuscript that I'm working on. And this is my prompt. So in the following excerpt from an academic manuscript, point out all possible claims and arguments that are potentially contradictory, speculative, illogical, or debatable. So here, I'm not looking for it to tell me how great my research is. I wanted to find flaws, contradictions. Then I ask it to proceed to suggest any alternative perspectives and radically different ways of approaching the issue and explaining it. Adopt different perspectives, so a bit of role-playing as well. Adopt perspectives that are divergent, multidisciplinary, comprehensive, open-minded. Well, I want to think broadly about this. How can I critique this paper? So this is especially helpful before I'm submitting it somewhere, or before I'm going to present it to colleagues here at SSE. So here it lists all the potentially debatable claims and arguments so that I can strengthen them or preempt criticism. For section 2, here, so it gives me practitioner feedback. I want academic feedback. So then I clarify. I want recommendations for the author, not for practitioner. Okay, so here are alternative perspectives, socio-technical systems, ecological economics, multidisciplinary. It told me about postmodern perspectives that I wouldn't have thought of. Again, just to expand my mind and my thinking. And then lastly, data analysis, the third example here. So I took a random data set here. Again, this is about saving time, not necessarily things I would have done, I wouldn't have done otherwise. But here I just tell it to the data set for me. Perform an exploratory data set of the data analysis of this data set. So I got a wine data set from Kaggle. And I give it a definition of the variables. But it could probably figure that out on its own. And then you see that it starts to analyze the data set for me. And again, prompt engineering, I'm not even saying what I want. It's much better to chat than to try to write the perfect prompt from the start. So here I'm just telling it to perform an exploratory data analysis. And if it gets it wrong, I'm just going to say, no, I meant this. It's a much more efficient way, I find, to interact with language models. So it analyzes, and then it fixes a mistake on its own. And then it asks me, do you want visualizations? And I say, yes, proceed with visualizations. So then it visualizes the data set for me. And this takes 2 minutes instead of 20 minutes. And I get an overview, and it might also, in this exploration, look at things, correlations that I otherwise maybe wouldn't have thought of necessarily. Then I tell it to conduct a PCA, and it knows that PCA stands for Principal Components Analysis. And it asks for some, or it actually clarifies the approach. And then there I get the code, Python code, one of the most popular programming languages. And I can replicate this. So this code that it gives me, when I run the code, it's deterministic. It's going to give me the same response every time. It's just that in the generation of the code, it's generative. And again, a visualization of the principal components that maximally predict what's going on in this data set. 2 minutes instead of 30 minutes it would take me, maybe. And then I ask it to build a machine learning model to predict what's going on in the wine data set. And it says there are different options, regression, classification, or clustering. And then see here, I'm not exactly prompt engineering, I just say clustering. Then it proceeds with the clustering analysis, and it explains that it does 3 clusters. And yes, proceed with these 3 groups. And it says here, these clusters suggest distinct groupings. Cluster 0 is the most common group. Cluster 1 is a premium segment. Cluster 2 is higher ABV and unit size, possibly specialty or stronger wines. Makes sense. Again, I can more quickly explore what's going on here, and I can take the code and replicate it or adjust it as I want afterwards. But it's speeding up my ability to make sense of new research or new data sets. And also expanding my mind and perspectives. Okay, so prompting. There are some principles that I think make sense to keep in mind. First is that you need to put a little effort into it, especially if you're not very used to prompting and talking to these models. Most people would basically write Google queries, and that's not how this technology, you're not gonna get the most out of this technology if you use it as Google or as a database, because it's not a database and it's not Google. It's a conversational agent. So you need to refine and iterate. Large language models like ChatGPT are not typical databases or search engines. So fact checking is important if you're asking questions where there's a right or wrong answer. And the consequence is that it actually works best for topics that you're familiar with rather than unfamiliar. So if they're improving all the time, sure, and they're becoming more and more reliable. So when a language model in this text generation, for example, it might say things that are not accurate or not true because there's this randomness component in how it generates outputs. And this means that, it can be creative, but also it means that it can get things wrong, and it does get things wrong. So we cannot trust it like if we're using other IT software, like a database. We're not used to computers making things up. Those are called hallucinations. So when generative AI output things that are wrong, that's a hallucination. So you need to know what you're talking about or what you're using it for. Exploring a brand new research topic or a theory, I would maybe use ChatGPT to get an overview, but then I would actually go read articles because I cannot trust it, especially when it's beyond like a basic level or a very general level of explaining the nuances of a new theory. So then mainly use it where you assess the output well. That's the main takeaway here, I would say. There are a couple of things worth keeping in mind. Structuring prompts, provide it with a little context, because otherwise it's not going to know exactly what you're after. How do you want it to write a Financial Times article? Do you want it to write an academic manuscript? Is it a blog post? Is it a LinkedIn post? Some specifics, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. But the most important tip I have is to iterate. Rather than trying to get it right from the start, try to iterate a couple of times to see if it can figure out what you're after. Okay, so I think this is a good time for me to share some examples. Just very briefly, I'll mention some prompt approaches. So zero shot, few shot prompting. Zero shot is where you just ask it for what you want. Few shot is you provide some examples and you explain a little more what you're after. Chain of thought prompting is probably one of the most powerful ones, which is you tell it to go step by step. So literally think step by step when you're asking it for something. If you add that, then it's going to break down the reasoning or the steps in the generation of text. So here, for example, it gets a math question wrong because it's not calculating typically, but it's predicting words. So that is not the best approach. It's not the best use of the tool either. But here in this example, through chain of thought prompting, where you show it how to calculate something like the number of tennis balls, then it gets it right. So you increase the accuracy, you decrease the hallucination oftentimes when you use chain of thought prompting. Another thing I do is just dump everything into the context window in the chat session so that it has all the context and it can infer on its own. That's my own approach here. So I just give it the whole article and ask it to summarize it for me. I think at this point, I'll go ahead and share my other screen where, as I mentioned, I always have ChatGPT and Claude ready to help me out. So I'll stop share there and I'll just do a little demo of something. So I hope you can see ChatGPT here. I have it zoomed in. And what I thought I would do is, so I got a bunch of questions for this webinar. Don't worry, I made sure that I'm not using any names or any sensitive information. But what I'm doing here is I'm attaching the questions I got. And then I can just ask ChatGPT to summarize the questions I got for a webinar on prompt engineering. So super simple conversational style. So here, basics, where do I find AI developers, AI and geo data? And here it's actually coding for me already. So you can see in real time, it's outputting, and I didn't even ask it to code. I was just expecting it to analyze it for me and summarize it for me. But here it's giving me, so I can just stop it there, no code, but summarize in one paragraph. And here it summarizes for me. Some wanted to scale it effectively. Some want to use it for automation, creating presentation decks, finding AI talent. One question touched on geopolitics. So I'm sorry to disappoint you. I can't topics today. My ambition here is to inspire some use cases. Okay, so here next thing would be to do a topic modeling analysis. So that's a method used. I think that's what I was trying to do before as well. So topic modeling is a natural language processing technique, machine learning technique, where you have a lot of unstructured data. And usually I would probably need to talk to a coder or people with technical expertise, but this kind of democratizing our ability to do analyses like these that are a little more advanced, a little more data driven. So here here are the topics. So the main topics going on in this data set, according to this analysis, is prompt engineering tools creativity, best practices use cases, mastering prompting writing, learning and AI workflows, basics and AI development. Okay, so here you can see how, and here's the code. So I could just copy this code, take it to Python environment and it. And then I could use this in a research project or something like that, perhaps. Okay, so another example here, I hope you can still see, here is DeepSeek, a hot topic right now. It's a model from China that competes with OpenAI and ChatGPT's reasoning models. Here, as I said, I was working on a manuscript and I have this reference list, all the references here, and I need to format them. So I use referencing software, but I want to double check that it corresponds to the style guide for the journal I'm submitting to. So here I copy the style guide from the journal that I'm submitting this article to, where they explain how I'm supposed to format my references. And here I say, here's my bibliography. Check that it adheres to the style guide. Output any discrepancies in structure, format, an example for each such discrepancy. So I can do a new chat here, and I just paste what I just said, my bibliography, the style guide. And let's see what it does. So I'm using the deep think model. So it's thinking, and you can see here, okay, let me try to figure out this bibliography against the provided style guide. First, I need to think. So this is what's called a reasoning model. So this isn't the actual output. This is what is going on under the hood, behind the scenes. So it's checking the order. The list should be alphabetical by author's last name, chronological for the same author. Let's check for authors with multiple entries. Wait, but Agrawal et al. Have entries in multiple years. Okay. So it's still thinking, it's still processing. So as opposed to the other models that just immediately start predicting words, this one is basically doing chain of thought prompting on its own. I'm simplifying a bit, but this is essentially to get the hallucinations down. It's going through the whole list here and just double checking everything here for entries with DOI. This includes, so it's still thinking, it's still processing my prompt. And this is what's the kind of the new frontier with these kind of models, is that they are not just guessing right away, but they're actually doing this what's called reasoning during inference time, when it's inferring, when it's processing my prompts. So we can let that work in the background. I wanted to show one more application. So I switched to Claude here, which is the other competitor. And I'm just going to upload some public documents about SSE. So a fact sheet, brochure, and the annual report. And the sustainability report. So Claude has something called artifacts. And artifacts are, it doesn't just generate code for me, but it's actually able to run that code for me during the chat session. So here, I'm going to ask it to create an artifact, an interactive dashboard for the president of the Stockholm School of Economics. Make sure all buttons work. Including, I don't really know what I'm looking for here. I'm improvising, so let's see how it works. Include levers and similar. And if it doesn't work, I'll just iterate. Again, use the attached documents and make it useful for SSE strategy. Okay, so it's too long. I need to delete the document. So apparently it's too long, so I'll just do that instead. So then it's pondering. Let's see how DeepSeek is doing. Okay, so here we're getting finally. So journal names not italicized, missing AB labels for same author. So you get the idea. It went through everything here, saying that you're a missing article. So it would catch things that I otherwise would not catch, or at least summarize them for me. Okay, so back to Claude. Claude is creating the dashboard for me. And here you can see it's coding in real time. And I don't know how to code very well. This would take me weeks. So again, if I'm in an organization and I want to prototype something, or I want to do a mock-up of something, this is very useful because I don't just get the code here, but I can toggle to the preview. So here, the strategic dashboard target year. So if we expand the strategic horizon to 2029, here are some key metrics: international presence, graduate employment, corporate partnerships. So this is quite useful, getting an overview. Again, you wouldn't have to double check because, and this is just a prototype, right? This isn't meant to be actually put into production, but there's a way for me to explore ideas relating to software development or where there's necessary. It's asking me here, it's explaining the approach a little bit. So it's fully interactive. You can toggle between different metrics, adjust target years. And then I could just give it more context or explain a little more, and it's going to iterate for me. And it doesn't really matter what. I could just ask it to make it green for me for some reason. And then it's going to go ahead and start over and code it for me the way I want. And then coming back to some strategic thinking, I could ask it to do a pre-mortem. So instead of a post-mortem, I could do a pre-mortem for SSE. So I could ask it to, it's a little slow right now. So for some strategic thinking, I would, for example, I'll just start over at ChatGPT. So conduct a pre-mortem for the Stockholm School of Economics. So in here, this is few shots. So I give it a definition from Wikipedia of a pre-mortem, which is it thinks about what could go wrong. So this is an exercise for brainstorming ahead of time. What are some things that we need to have on our radar? So here, and it knows that it should be as a press release here, the collapse of SSE in 2035. It's the year 2035. It says officially closed its doors. What could have led to this outcome? Financial mismanagement, funding shortfalls, failure to adapt. loss of industry relevance. So with students, for example, I would do this exercise analog first without any generative AI, and then only afterwards we would do this exercise for their startups, for example, to see what could go wrong. Because that way we don't stop thinking for ourselves, but here it can help us uncover blind spots or see new perspectives. So you see that it has a lot here. So I could oftentimes ask it to be a little more concise, but I think you get the idea. Great. So, and here again, I would ask it something like, so the AI Commission here in Sweden did a report on AI and what it implies for Sweden. So here I could ask, what does this report imply for SSE? Because this is a net win if I don't have the time to do this myself anyway, because like you, I have a lot on my plate. So here it's reading the document. And here again, gives me suggestions. AI in digital transformation leadership, AI in entrepreneurship ecosystem. It breaks down the report. Here it's still, see here, it's still on the pre-mortem stuff. So then I would have to say, no pre-mortem, just a SWOT analysis. So here, strengths, reputation, brand, industry connections, weaknesses, AI digital curriculum. Well, I'm trying, doing my best. Opportunities, threats. Again, not all of this is going to make sense, right? But it's going to get you 80% of the way in a shorter amount of time, and ideally also expand your thinking. Okay, so I hope those examples are helpful. I see a question here. So what is ChatGPT best used for and what is Claude best used for? So this changes almost every week. It feels like, at least to me. I like Claude because it has artifacts, so I can prototype things in it. And I can run that code right away. I don't have to take it from ChatGPT. Oh, I think even ChatGPT launched that ability recently. So they're constant, and there's a lot of competition and a lot going on there. So they're evolving every week. Though again, you just have to experiment. I like the way Claude writes, as in English. I just like how it expresses itself. It's very, I think it's eloquent. ChatGPT has this O1 model, reasoning model, kind of like DeepSeek. The Chinese model. So that one thinks things through a little more, does more chain of thought prompting for you, so you don't have to. But again, it's just something that you have to figure out which model works best for your use cases and your way of working. So what if you are using ChatGPT to help you fix an issue with software you are unfamiliar with? How can you make sure the answer you receive is accurate, up-to-date, and trustworthy? That's a great question. And again, when it's writing the code that I showed, it's using this random mechanism and predicting. But with code, you can debug pretty easily. So in a sense, it's easier than language or a consulting report or an analysis of an academic manuscript, because the code, it runs or it doesn't run. But then, as with any other process, you need quality assurance, you need compliance, you need all of those things still. It's just that it's a different way of working. You become an editor, a reviewer, rather than the person producing everything from scratch. And then, as I've found in my research, that requires new skills, upskilling and reskilling in a way that is specific to AI. So I just wanted to, before I dive back into the questions, I just want to use this opportunity to mention that I'm really excited about this. Coming back to that what ChatGPT said is a weakness with regards to the AI strategy for Sweden, the lack of a curriculum. So for executive education, we are launching a brand new program called AI for Business Leaders. So it's for anyone who wants to know the basics, including prompting, but kind of taking it to the next level, the things that we talked about today, and identifying business opportunities. So the focus in this program is strategy, execution, and actually having an impact on the business, rather than getting stuck in pilots and prototypes or technologies like the neural networks and how they work. That's not the focus. The focus is strategy and impact. And in this program, all the participants will work on their own AI blueprint so that you formulate your own roadmap for implementing AI in your organization. So the start is in March, and it's in total 3.5 days. So half day online onboarding webinar, and then 1 day here at SSE for a little more theory flavor on strategy and on leadership, and then 2 days at Sebastian outside of Sigtuna, where it's much more focused on applications and workshopping and getting your hands dirty with some practical exercises and innovation workshops as well, including with generative AI. So if you are at all interested, curious, please get in touch with my colleagues or with me. But there at the bottom, you see the contact details for Marcus and Lava. So do reach out to them if you are interested in learning more about the program. But yeah, so back again to the questions. Let's see, trying to keep up. Aspiring. Okay, so this was the same question. So as an aspiring data analysis, wonder if there's still a prospect for a human in the field, since AI can analyze and summarize data faster than it could. Any thoughts? Yeah, I'm actually cautiously optimistic that a lot of the grunt work will be automated. So it's up to us, right? How organizations, as leaders, as coders, how we use the technology. And what I'm always looking for is complementarities between humans and AI so that we can accomplish more. So as I was talking about today with some of the exercises or examples rather, summarizing things that would take me a lot of time, so that I think about strategy, the big picture of what am I coding and why? Could we do this differently? Avoid some path dependencies. Well, I already have this code in place, I might as well use it. Well, you could rebase the whole code, right? So it's not necessarily the case that it's going to automate everything. Is that we need to adapt and adjust and think about where are we creating value. And it's going really quickly. So that graph at the beginning, it's catching up really quickly, including in coding and mathematics. But I see that as, and I'm optimistic in the sense that it can let us be more human. It lets us focus our efforts on interpersonal aspects. So instead of crunching the data, no, I could very quickly get an idea of what people were looking for. I hope I was able to at least cater to some of your interests today. With the help of AI, it's not replacing me. AI is not doing this webinar. I'm doing this webinar, right? So that's my take on it. Another question here. What is the best way to protect company-sensitive data while using generative AI? So that depends on the license that you have. So this is, you obviously need to involve whatever function at your company, the legal, compliance, IT, in this conversation. But for example, a lot of the applications that I have and focus on don't depend on sensitive data. So help me rethink this, adopt a new perspective, do a pre-mortem for this industry. But of course, when it comes to actually building stuff, we're actually using company internal ones. It depends on the license you have. So if you have an enterprise or a company license, typically they don't train on data in the chats. So that's typically a recommendation. Copilot from Microsoft often integrates with Office, so then it works right away. But also you can run open models locally without an internet connection even. So I'm not a coder, but I managed in 1 hour to set up one of these models, Llama, on my own laptop, and I don't even need internet. So I can run it right there on my laptop, and it's not communicating with the outside world. Shall I be afraid of DeepSeek? I'm not afraid. I'm using it. I think it's not quite as good as ChatGPT's O1, but it's impressive because they got there much more quickly and apparently cheaply. But I think it's great with competition and innovation. So yeah, thank you, everyone. I think that's time. So thank you, everyone. What a great turnout. So thank you, everyone, for joining today's session and for all your questions. So make sure to answer the feedback survey if you can. Really want to hear from you, and we'll stay in touch. So yeah, thank you so much, and happy prompting.